Let's look at the Qur'an not as a linear story, but as a living operating system. We're going to explore a framework that presents it as a kind of cosmic blueprint, one built on a dualistic architecture, a system that actually models reality itself.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dive into this idea of a universe built on a fundamental duality. Then, we'll look at the specific creation framework that emerges from it. After that, we'll see how that same framework is mirrored in humanity. And finally, we'll examine the mathematical signature that supposedly seals the entire system.
Okay, so the core idea is this. Reality isn't just one thing. It's constructed upon two fundamental opposing fields. And everything that exists, absolutely everything, is just an interaction between them.
And here they are, the two primal fields. On one side, you have the light field. Think of this as the source of timeless, absolute law, command, constraint. On the other side, you have the sound field, which is all about temporal experience, mercy, and flow. Now, here's the critical part. These two fields are like matter and antimatter. If they were to touch directly, it would cause mutual annihilation.
So you might be wondering, how do these two opposing forces ever interact? Well, they do it through a mediating principle called the buffer, or the Mīzān. You can think of it as an interface, a kind of safe zone where the two fields can influence each other without destroying everything. And it's right there, in that buffer, that consciousness, and more importantly free will and choice, can actually emerge. It's what allows the whole system to function.
This whole concept of the light field isn't just some abstract idea. It's anchored directly in the text itself. It's presented not as a simple metaphor, but as the foundational constant of reality, the domain of timeless truth and command.
Okay, let's build on that. This primary duality isn't just some background noise. It's actually encoded into a very specific, repeating architectural framework for creation itself.
And this is that framework. 2-3-7. It's basically a three-stage protocol. It all starts with 2, the principle of duality, that everything is created in pairs. From there, it moves to 3, which represents a triad of testing where knowledge gets processed. And finally, it all resolves in 7, which stands for 7 layers of completion in return, like the 7 heavens mentioned in the text. So you have creation, test, completion.
And this framework isn't just inferred, it's grounded directly in the Qur'an's own description of creation. If you look at verses 9 through 12 of Surah 41, it lays out this precise pattern, a 2-stage formation that culminates in 7 heavens. The text is literally describing its own underlying structure. It's a self-referential blueprint. So this cosmic law is fascinating, but how does it become tangible? Where do we see it in action? Well, let's look at the prime example, the architecture of humanity itself, which this framework says directly mirrors that particle field dynamic we talked about.
Right here we can see a direct mapping of that duality onto human roles. The male function is described as being particle-like. It's discrete, it's named, and it represents a specific action or intervention, what you might call a collapsed or decided state. On the other hand, the female function is field-like. It's continuous, it's containing, and it's very often unnamed. It represents the field of all potential, the superposition, from which any specific outcome can emerge. And you see this reflected in the text, right? You have all these named prophets, and then you have these unnamed relational roles like the wife of or the mother of.
But that immediately brings up a huge question, doesn't it? If the system is really based on a balanced duality, then why do we see this apparent asymmetry in naming? Why are most women unnamed?
Well, the proposed answer comes straight from physics. Naming is a form of measurement, and measurement collapses superposition. Think about it. An outcome exists in a state of all possibilities until you measure it, and then it collapses into one specific reality. For the female field to function as that domain of all potential, it has to remain unmeasured, and in this system, that means it must remain unnamed.
And this brings us to Maryam. She is the crucial exception that proves the rule. As the only woman who is named in the Qur'an, her naming represents the field being made visible, a temporary collapse into a particle-like state. And what happens next? Her plea in the text to be a thing forgotten, completely forgotten, is interpreted as the field seeking to return to its natural, unmeasured state of superposition.
This all leads us to our final exhibit, the mathematical proof that is presented as the seal over this entire architecture, the thing that ensures its integrity. And at the very heart of this mathematical structure is a single constant, the number 19. It acts as the system's underlying code, its validation key.
Now, this number isn't just pulled out of thin air. The text explicitly states in Surah 74, over it are 19, which establishes it as a deliberate structural key for the entire system.
And the evidence for this constant is reportedly woven throughout the Qur'an's structure. You have 114 chapters. That's exactly 19 times 6. The total verse count, 6,236, is 19 times 328. The basmala, which is the opening phrase for almost every single chapter, is made of precisely 19 Arabic letters. According to this framework, this consistent 19-base structure acts as a mathematical seal, proof that this is a precisely designed, tamper-proof system.
So we don't end with a neat summary, because the entire system is presented not just as information to be known, but as a function to be activated. The final question reframes everything we've just looked at into a direct command, a protocol. When will you activate 1912 and become the book?